Welcome back to the Pod Shed. Had some fun the last couple weeks with the Gladiator that Mopar loaned me, and I haven't spent time in a Gladiator like this since my four-wheeler days, so it's been several years, and the 25 is nice because it's a little bit quieter, a little bit more refined. Love the interior, obviously the same as my 392, but the dash is great. The larger screen that is landscape is great, and I've just really enjoyed it, and I've taken it up to the property a few times, and it does the things I want it to do. It's rugged enough for off-road, and it is comfortable enough for around town, especially with that Mopar 2-inch lift and 35s and Bilsteins. It's really perfect for the kind of do-it-all truck. I think the 33s are enough on a Gladiator, but because of the extended wheelbase on those trucks over the competition, 35s are nice to have, and it also looks better on 35s. Honestly, I think 37s look great, but totally fine on 35s, and you don't have to re-gear because the transmission, has a low enough first gear to make up for it. And I've been getting on the highway, somewhere around 17, 18 miles per gallon, something like that, which is totally fine. And I wonder, this one's a Rubicon, and I'm thinking, well, I could probably get away with the Mojave, ride a little bit better. And it has the Mopar Fox shocks with the jounce in the front, which I really enjoy. I don't necessarily need the front locker, but then I was looking at the Saharas with, I believe they have a limited slip in the back, and I'm like, well, that's probably even nicer for around town. So we'll see. This has really warmed my heart up to Gladiators, to be sure, and I've really enjoyed having it. And we have a car seat in the back seat for my 8-year-old, and no problem. Like, she climbs in and buckles herself in, and there's plenty of room, and it does all the things. So I've really enjoyed it. But I recently went out to KOH for the day, and right before I went out there, I installed the flated air topper that the guys from Flated sent when they were on the show. They literally sent it. Like, it was like the next day I had an air topper sitting on my porch. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to put this on the Gladiator and see how it goes. And I love those guys. You know that. You know from our interview. I believe in what they're doing. I think the product is great, but I've never really had firsthand day-to-day engagement or experience living with their product. And I got to tell you, I'm more than impressed. I'm glad that I got it. So far, it's lived up to the promise of being the topper that doesn't ruin your life. I was able to install it. I think the first time was about 45 minutes, but that included unpacking and putting together some of the pieces like the windows and screens. But now I bet I could take it off in 5 minutes, deflate it in another 5, and store it in the corner. I think installation should probably take about 15 minutes if you were unfolding it from the storage bag, which is like a backpack. And it's great. So here are the things I really like about it. Number one, I think it makes the truck look better. Number two, I've had a lot of people going, hey, what's that? Is that an inflatable? Like, tell me about the topper. And it draws attention, so I've been answering all sorts of questions about it. The quality is fantastic on it. There's no noise, no creaking off-road. Like I said, it went out to KOH. By the way, shout out to the couple of listeners who grabbed me out there and said hi. I wish I would have had time to grab a picture with you guys, but thank you so much. I always love getting out there and seeing people. So shout out to you guys. Anyway, going back to no noise, no cracking. You don't have to worry about it off-road. There's actually less wind noise from the Gladiator with it on. I think because it's cab height, it smooths that airflow over the back window so you don't hear it right there. The fit's fantastic, super sturdy. Just the ease of use of it, and it's all Velcro and some zippers, and it works great. And then even on the inside, there's a couple of mesh pockets, so if you're camping in there, you can put your wallet or your phone, that's all there. There's no degradation in ride quality or payload because it doesn't weigh anything. And maybe some drawbacks are it's a little bit less secure than a hard lockable topper. There might be some dust intrusion, but it would rain for several days, and it held up to the rainstorm just fine without getting the bed soaked. And right now, there's nothing in the bed. There's not even a bed liner back there. It's just a painted bed, and it was totally fine. So anyway, those are just a few of my thoughts after living with it for a few weeks, and I just wanted to follow up with you guys and let you know how great it is. So to me, it seems like the perfect in-between product for somebody who occasionally needs a topper but still wants full use of their bed or vice versa. But if you want one for yourself, there's a special link and a discount of 15% by going on the featured products page of our website, truckshowpodcast.com. So if you want something from Flated, they have a whole line of products. The other one I really like is the air carrier, right? It's like that Yakima box, but inflatable that goes on your roof. That's another one. Anyway, you can use our link, get 15% off, grab yourself something from Flated, support those guys. I've been really impressed with the product and would love to keep spreading that word for them. And they're just a bunch of good dudes. So anyway, I think you enjoyed the conversation we had with them. But today's conversation on this episode, I think you're really going to enjoy too. I'm really excited about it because it revolves around diesels, and we haven't jumped into diesels for a while. So this one's kind of special. Our guest for this show is Brad Hunt from Protech Diesel in Kamloops, BC. He was actually in SoCal for business and said, hey, I'm in town. I'm like, come to the pod shed. So he came in studio. We had this really great, informative conversation about all things diesel. I think you'll really enjoy it. But before we welcome Brad, we need to, of course, thank the companies that make the Truck Show podcast possible. The Truck Show podcast is proudly brought to you in partnership with AMSOIL, the maker of the best synthetics and the same ones we use in our rigs. Did you know that AMSOIL is more than just a synthetic oil? They also make some of the finest lubricants, greases, additives, filters, car care products, and yes, even merch. We use AMSOIL products to protect our rigs, and you can do the same by heading to AMSOIL.com. If you need a knife, then head on over to Kershaw.KaiUSA.com and explore their line of exceptional pocket knives. They have a huge selection of quality knives from EDCs to made in the USA and automatics. Score one for yourself today. And if you want to treat yourself to the latest in adventure, gear, and upgrades for your vehicle, go to OVRMag.com and use the code @TruckShowPodcast for a discount on print or 1-year access to our digital library for free. Please help me to keep the Truck Show podcast free by supporting our sponsors and leaving reviews on Apple or Spotify. And don't forget, check out TruckShowPodcast.com for the latest deals.
The Truck Show. We're gonna show you what we know. We're gonna answer what the truck, 'cause truck rhymes with the Truck Show. We have the lifted, we have the lowered, and everything in between. We'll talk about trucks that run on diesel, electricity, and on gasoline. The Truck Show, the Truck Show, the Truck Show. Oh, oh.
It's the Truck Show with your host, Holman.
That's right. You're back in the pod shed in lovely Huntington Beach, California, although you might be able to hear it's raining outside right now. But I think because I have the pod shed so insulated from outside noises, hopefully you can't hear it. So without further ado, here's the interview I did with Brad Hunt from Protech Diesel Center in the pod shed. Please enjoy. So I'd like to welcome to the pod shed backyard studio, Brad Hunt from Protech Diesel Center out of BC, Canada.
Yeah, how you guys doing?
What are you doing down here?
I came down to hang out in beautiful California. It's nice and warm down here.
Yeah,
Came to spend a little bit of time with Banks Power and go through some Monster Ram stuff and some other parts.
So Jay reached out to me and he's like, dude, Brad's down. You got to have him on the show. I'm like, dude, I've got so much. He's like, dude, he's only going to be here. Oh, fine. So you're able to get down here and we're going to knock out a podcast. So I guess your claim to fame would be you're the one who really kind of discovered the grid heater bolt failure with the Rams, with the Cummins engine, which everybody thought was an anomaly until it wasn't. And you kind of put some stuff out there and people are like, yeah, that's like, it'll never. And all of a sudden, boom, they just started hitting the mileage. Cylinder 6 just started to drop and take the engines with them, right?
Yeah, we knew about the failure for years, actually. And we had, hundreds of trucks that we dealt with over the years with the failure, and we were replacing engines.
So you were doing full engine replacements at that point. So you knew, because sort of the thing that happens is, there's corrosion or electrolysis that basically takes the stud and weakens it to the point where the nut falls off. It usually falls into cylinder 6, and then it gets smushed and rolls around inside the engine, and that's a $25,000 diesel engine replacement job here in the States, probably more in Canada, right?
Yeah, in Canada, it's like 30 to 35K probably. If you're going complete.
Yeah.
Depending on the damage from the bolt, sometimes the bolt just bends a valve or hits the center of the piston and kind of damages the head where it doesn't do any cylinder wall damage. And then if you don't have any cylinder wall damage, you could theoretically pull the engine out and get it machined and, put it all back together and put a new head on and do it that way, which would be a little bit less. But 9 times out of 10, by the time the people get pulled over, it's already got to the corner of the wall and it's gouged the wall up, and it ends up being, it's just cheaper to buy a replacement.
And it's not something that you can drive on for 50 miles to get your diesel shop. Like, it happens, you're done.
Yeah, it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
The only time guys get lucky is if the bolt breaks off big enough that it's still floating around on top of the valve stem.
Okay.
Which we've had quite a few of those. And then, they don't require an engine build. It's basically just head gasket and pull it apart and put all the top end back together. So that's definitely a lot easier. But when we first discovered, started seeing the failures, there was really nobody was diagnosing it at the time. It's guys would, just say, oh, well, it's a common rail Cummins. It's, must have a wash cylinder from a bad injector or something like that. Guys weren't going down into the cylinders looking with bore scopes and finding these broken bolts. They were just having a cylinder 6 failure and just pulling the engine out and putting a new engine in. And when we first started seeing it, we were noticing the grid heater bolts were breaking because we were buying long block engines instead of complete. So if you buy a complete, you're just out and in and, no big deal. But we were buying long blocks.
Basically saves money because you can reuse some of the components that aren't worn off of the engine you're replacing.
Exactly. And then we started pulling the heater grid assemblies off the engines and noticing that everything was missing. And
charred and
broken.
Good,
but at the time we didn't really have a solution. So we were putting engines in the trucks with replacement grid heaters from Cummins. We didn't know about the Monster Ram in the beginning.
Yeah.
So, so for a few years, we were just dealing with this problem internally and replacing them as they came. And, you'd see, where we would probably see 1 or 2 a year, in the earlier years.
Is it just mileage based, or is it if you use your heater to preheat the engine before you start it, there's going to be more wear because the electricity going through it, or is it just, again, simply mileage?
There's actually quite a few different scenarios with the heater grid failures. So mileage is definitely a factor for sure. But that being said, we have customers that have well over 400,000 miles on their trucks, and the grid heaters are perfectly fine and intact. So there's really no mileage basis to the failure. I would more say climate is definitely a thing for sure. In the colder climates, your heater grids are going to turn on a lot more often, so you're going to see more failures. Also, the fact that some of them will loosen up over time from just hot and
just
cold
vibration
and vibration.
Thermal,
And once they loosen a little bit, like even a quarter thread, if they loosen that far, well, now you've got a loose contact. So now you've got
it's arcing as well as moving around in there.
Yeah, you got a ton of extra heat, and they'll melt off. You also have a bunch of relay failures. And certain years there was actually relay upgrades and recalls, but nobody ever thinks about the relay. And a lot of times the relay will stick on, and then it'll just heat that bolt to the point that it's red hot, and it'll just break off. And then it works its way down the intake runner and then ends up in cylinder 6.
Yeah.
So that's how it all kind of came to be. And, we ended up, there were a few years into dealing with these things. And then one day
Did you ever reach, you're probably dealing more on the higher mileage side, so you probably weren't like seeing a brand new truck and then reaching out to Cummins saying, hey, you have this issue. You're probably just thinking, oh, this is kind of wear and tear, or like, what was going through your mind as a shop owner? Were you like, I've got to raise the flag on this one so somebody realizes that this is really a epidemic across, this platform? Yeah,
we started seeing more and more and more of them as the years went on. But, I would say a lot of guys are like, oh, mileage related. But, in reality, we've had trucks at 20,000 miles.
Wow.
Like 50,000 kilometers, 50,000 kilometers in Canada. That's pretty common, so I would say the majority of the failures that we've dealt with are between 50,000 and 250,000 K, kind of in that range, right? Which is, gets to be, that 160 to 200,000 mile range is pretty common. But we have seen them as low as, like I say, as 20,000 miles and they're failing. And it's funny because we actually did reach out, to Cummins and to Chrysler, and they basically denied that there was an issue. And,
sure.
That was kind of, you couldn't get any further up the ladder on that problem. And after dealing with it for a few years, we've actually discovered literature on the internet that is out there, basically from Cummins directly to Chrysler, admitting to the issue I have a letter from 2007 and a half.
Oh, wow.
The trucks were, I think it was April or May of 2007. The letter was dated to Cummins, or not to Cummins, to Chrysler, to remove the heater grid assemblies and use a grinder to grind the bottom threads to make it so that the nut couldn't back off. So this was when the trucks were brand new.
Yeah.
And if you pull a heater grid off now and you flip it upside down and look at it, you'll actually see that the threads are a little
So there's like a little
weird.
bevel basically to keep it so if they loosen up, it doesn't drop all the way down.
That was the theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that, again, doesn't fix the problem because it creates, now, if it does loosen up, it creates an arcing point and they'll break. So, so in the end, it brought it all to light with getting it blown up to where people actually saw that there was an issue. Because for the first few videos that we put out on the failure, you get all the keyboard guys on there and they're all like, oh, it's 1 in 10,000. I've never seen one in my career. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's, it's blown out of proportion. And, and then here I am with, probably 3 or 4 buckets of failed grid heaters laying on my floor. And I'll just
How are you lucky enough to get the 1 out of 10,000 and you have 30 of them in the shop over the past year or something, right?
And that's the thing. It's like, I literally did a video for Banks with a picture of just a table full of failures. And, and then people are like, oh, well, only the one bolt breaks, but the other one inside doesn't. And it's like, no, they have both. They both fail and they're both a weak point. So we went through all of that and we actually got teamed up with Banks on this through a customer. So we had a customer come in and he was low. He was like 80,000 kilometers. So what is that? That's like 55, 60,000 miles. And he had a complete failure. He was driving, the bolt went into the piston, took out the engine. And he was doing some IDASH testing for Banks. So he knew Jay and he called Jay and said, hey, can you send me a Monster Ram because I have to put an engine in my truck? And then he explained to Jay what was going on, and we didn't even know that the Monster Ram existed at this point. We were still using factory grid heaters because we didn't see any advertising.
And we can back up really quick. So at that time, Monster Ram was more of an airflow, performance modification or better efficiency. But what they did was instead of having the grid heater attached with a bolt, they had like a billet grid heater. It's like a plate. So essentially, without knowing about it, they solved the problem. And it was never marketed that way until, we started even talking about it on the show when that conversation was going on, right? It was like, hey, there's these failures. And I'm like, really? I've never heard of that, right? And now it's this big thing. But Monster Rams have become, in fact, my uncle just got one for his 24 Ram. Because of the insurance, he's like, it's not that much money to make sure I don't have to spend $25,000 on an engine down the road.
Well, and that's just it. And Banks built it for performance and fuel economy. They actually had no idea that there even was a failure.
They're solving this future massive problem nobody knew about yet. Right?
Yeah, and we didn't know it existed, and they didn't know the problem existed, and it all just kind of came together all at once on this one particular customer that happened to, get us in touch with Banks. And then, we talked it out and said, okay, this is the fix for this problem, because they went to, they eliminated the grid heater completely in the design. It's got an open bed plate where it's straight through. And then they went to a coil style heater, and we were like, well, this is great. This is going to solve, all the problems. And then that's when they sent us one. We put an engine in the truck and we did the first video. And, and the first video, of course, took off like wildfire, and, and now it's just been building over a couple of years.
And you probably have people who replaced an engine and went, that's what happened to mine. But they said this is like probably all making sense to a lot of people too, right?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. And not only that, it gets a lot of people to check the wire. So, because, we did a few videos just basically showing people how to check at home. Just to keep an eye on it, and it's, there's a lot of videos out there now. There's a lot of guys, pushing the fix, and there's a lot of companies that build other products that, really don't fix the problem either.
Yeah, but they're trying to go through the gold rush of selling something that's supposed to fix the problem, but the design acumen isn't there, or it's not, they don't understand the problem fully. So their solution isn't exactly a replacement, because they're trying to hit a price point, not a engineering solution.
That's right.
Where are we at now? The new 2025 Rams with the new upgraded Cummins don't have that design.
No.
They went back to a glow plug.
Yeah.
So basically that issue is, I guess, more or less solved from the factory. But there's an awful lot of engines out there, an awful lot of people that aren't educated as what could be a ticking time bomb, because righteously so, Cummins has an amazing reputation for dependability and reliability. And this has been one of those things that is a little bit of a black eye, because people were like, well, where did this come from? Because these engines, I've seen them I remember Diesel Power Challenge. We had a guy blow a hole through his freeze plugs, lose 2 cylinders, engine's on fire, and he's still finishing the tractor pull, or the sled pull with 4 cylinders. And you're just going, dude, well, what's it going to take to kill this thing? And they're obviously really hard to kill, but this is one of those kind of unforced errors where there's a component internally that can sort of self-destruct on itself.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it is. The Cummins has always been known as a reliable, durable engine. Right from the 12-valve days, the 12-valve kind of gave it its reputation as, being the so-called million-mile motor, right? Yeah. And, and as the years went on, the 24-valve, came out, and, they had some VP44 pump issues, but, for the most part, that engine was pretty much bulletproof as well, unless you ended up with, the 53 block where they would crack. But there was, years and years, you got guys that have millions of miles on Cummins engines, and then they came into the common rail, and the common rail was a game changer for, for economy and horsepower. Now you finally had a diesel engine that, actually put some power to the ground from the factory without. Yeah,
it didn't feel so industrial. Now you had something that was a little bit more appropriate for a light duty truck where you could drive it day in and day out, and it didn't have that medium duty feel to it.
Exactly. It wasn't
a little bit more refined, smoother, quieter, better throttle response, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And a little more economy, and the reliability was, still there, other than now you had the common rail injector issues, with guys not running proper fuel filters and proper maintenance. They'd take the
which is any
out.
Engine.
That's any engine. That's not a Cummins fault. That's this maintenance, an owner issue, right? Which causes them not to last as long. But the 6.7, unfortunately, the bolt was kind of the unforeseen failure that nobody really thought of. And honestly, I feel like a lot of people are, upset at the fact that they allowed this to be manufactured. And then once the failure is known and there's been proven for the last, 5 years or whatever that we've been doing this, and other shops that have found this and done videos, is there's tens of thousands of failures, I'm sure, North America wide, if not more. And, everybody's like, well, why is Cummins not doing a recall? If you go on any forums or, anything online, it's every third or fourth comment is it should be a recall. Why aren't they? And nothing has ever been done. It's just kind of been pushed under the rug, and we'll just pretend this problem goes away. Yeah. And then now with the 2025, they've redesigned it completely. So now you have an engine that has a side draft intake. You have glow plugs. You have external injectors. They're not internal anymore. So they've redesigned that whole engine.
So now they went back to a gray iron block because the previous generation had the compacted graphite iron block, right? Is it evolution, or is it an acknowledgement of some of the shortcomings of the previous gen? I guess you never know unless you're in the walls, but by all accounts, and I've driven them, the 25 engine is great, especially with the new 8-speed Power Torque ZF transmission. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to even see one in person yet. But I can't wait till we get one in and get a look at it and take it for a drive.
The transmission is the best part about it, because the first gear is so low, and so I think they're all 342 gears, and there's not a big 321 to 410 gear spread like there used to be.
Yeah.
So you get the economy on the top end because eighth is deep, and then 1 is low. So it's a pleasure to drive, and unlike some of the transmissions in the past where it didn't feel like the communication between the engine and the transmission were quite perfect, or you kind of get that roughness in between. This tranny is completely smooth, and it always feels like it's in the right gear. I was really impressed. Towed with it, I think I towed 18,000 pounds, something like that.
That's pretty good.
Did Davis Dam, did empty, did loaded with payload, drove one about 1,000 miles just as a test around here, and then took it up to Central California, and I mean, it was really, really impressive. So now we know about the grid heater bolt failure. what are some of the other things to look out for on Cummins? And then let's get into Power Stroke and Duramax. And I mean, you see it all coming through your shop, and I would imagine you probably have a lot of customers who really use their trucks too.
Yeah, we're in an industry kind of area. So, you know, where we're at, we're all 4 to 6% grades or better for hills. We're in the mountains. Our temperatures in the summer range, 80 to 100 degrees. So it's very hot, and there's a lot of hills. Everybody, they're either in the drilling industry or they're in construction or mining, or and they're all driving 1-ton trucks. So, you come to Kamloops, and pretty much, I would say every second or third house has a diesel truck, and they're not dailies; they're all work trucks. They use them for everything. They're pulling big weight all the time, and they're running them hard. And
so you get to see real world
failures.
Yeah.
And for the Cummins generations, we don't really see a lot of the older 12 valves anymore, because the guys that own them are working on them themselves. They look up videos, they figure out how to do it.
They're pretty simple.
They're hanging out with their buddies, having a beer, and they're just working on their trucks, right? So we don't see a ton of those. The VP44 trucks are kind of the same kind of deal. We still see injection pumps once in a while, but for the most part, it's all common rail stuff that comes through the shop, and it's basically the same few jobs. We're dealing with injector failures from lack of maintenance, or like the 5.9 common rails. You get to that 220 to 250,000 mile range, and the injectors are pretty much wore out if they haven't been maintaining them its whole life, or running good fuel conditioners, because nobody seems to run fuel conditioner. I don't know why, but all of our fuel where we are and where you are is so dry. Everybody should be running a fuel conditioner all the time. So we do a ton of injection stuff for fuel systems, on the 5.9 for sure. We've noticed the 6.7, the injectors are a lot tougher. We don't do quite as many sets of injectors in those, but the trade-off for the 6.7 is that now we're doing 68 RFE transmissions all the time, because they run too hot, and people are way overloading them, and they're smoking them. And, so we're constantly doing transmission upgrades, and cooling upgrades for the transmissions.
So coolers and clutch packs, things like that.
Yeah, we'll generally order in a built tranny, and put them in, and then added coolers, because they're just, for what guys are doing with them, they need the extra cooling. And then head gaskets. We do a ton of head gaskets on 6.7s. Yeah, but those are kind of the main kind of failures that that guys are looking for. But if you're living somewhere where it's all flat and you're just towing on flat ground, well, you probably don't see the head gasket failures, and you might not see as many transmission failures either. Yeah,
because you're not pushing it with the heat for extended loads up a hill or something, or downshifting and holding the entire truck and load back, right?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest downfall to all of these trucks, whether it be Ford, Dodge, or Chevy, it doesn't really matter, but I think the biggest downfall is that since common rail, they all build too much power for their own good, and I know everybody wants as much power as possible, but the reality is, when you can hook on to 10 or 15,000 pounds, and you can take a 6% grade for 5 to 8 miles on cruise at 100 and say 100 mile an hour, which they'll do.
Yeah,
there's something not right with that. Like you're towing that much weight.
And then you got the VGT turbos, and you don't have traditional exhaust brakes. They just adjust the vanes, so to help with hauling those loads down, and that's got to be at least a little bit stressful on the engine, I would imagine.
There's a lot going on. There's a lot of back pressure. There's a lot of heat.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't really think about that. Enthusiasts and guys that work on their own trucks, a lot of them have gauge packs and EGT gauges.
I love the iDash for that, because even on like my 392 in the driveway, the iDash is great for monitoring temps, all that kind of stuff. Jeep has a big engine and a small engine, big compartment, so you got to watch that kind of stuff, right? Just like if you were towing.
Yeah.
So on let's go to a Duramax platform. What are sort of the common jobs, maybe the top 3 or 4 things that you see of guys coming through the shop with a Duramax issue?
Mostly the Duramaxes are all around. They're actually a pretty good platform. The Allison transmissions hold up really, really well. Again, they do lack in cooling. just like a lot of the other trucks do. So we do see some issues with transmissions running hot and over temp on the Allisons because the factory coolers aren't big enough. So we see a lot of that. The early LB7s, you would see a ton of injectors there. Everybody knows there was a recall on those injectors right from GM. If they failed, they were getting replaced under a warranty, and as the years go on, it tends to seem that most people get about, 150 to 200,000 miles out of a set of, LB7 injectors. So we do a ton of injectors in LB7s, even still to this day. Because that's something a lot of guys don't do at home just because of how in-depth it is to do under valve cover injectors in those trucks.
You're talking about any type of contamination on your workbench is game over, and you've gone through all that work. And there's a reason injectors are expensive, because the amount of precision into the machining, into the part itself is mind-blowing to see how precise they have to be to meter that fuel just right.
Well, exactly. And the other big problem with the LB7 platform is they're under valve cover injectors, so the fuel lines go through the valve cover into the top of the injector. But what happens is all the years of condensation and dirt and rust and grime, everything falls into the top of the line, and there's nothing you can do to get in there and deal with it. And the second you crack that line loose, all of that debris falls right into the top of the injector. For that reason, 90% of shops won't even put a used injector back in. So if a customer has one injector failed and they have to pull that side apart,
you just do 4 injectors.
You do the whole bank, because it's not worth the risk of trying to deal with a contamination problem, because it's a 13-hour job to do a set of injectors on an LB7. So so guys don't want to do that, and then we acid dip
or they
lines.
do and the customer doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. We always acid dip the lines where we are, but nowadays the lines are getting so old that some of them have been done a couple of times, and so we're starting to replace them now with the injectors and just doing a whole set of lines while you do the injectors, and then you just don't have any chance of comebacks or warranty problems. And then you get into the LLY variation of the Duramax family, and they were, overall the LLY is actually pretty reliable, other than they had a head gasket issues right from the factory. The gasket was, they had a fire ring on the inside of the early gaskets. The updated gaskets don't have a ring, but what we would find with the fire ring is that when the head gaskets were installed and the heads were torqued down, it would actually over squish that fire ring, and it would put hairline cracks in it. And just over time and years of driving, those cracks would expand.
And just the heat cycle start pulling the material apart.
And then we've had trucks where they've actually got grooves in the corner of the pistons from that fire ring moving over into the cylinder. It just kind of walk over, and then the piston just touches it. And the fire ring's soft metal, so it's not like it's a big chunk that's going to put a hole in it or anything, but it's enough that it'll create wear. So, a lot of those trucks, they would overpressure and push coolant out of the coolant reservoirs. And so we do head gaskets and studs on those. And other than that issue, there's not really a whole lot, that goes wrong with that variation, So, and then of course the LBZ, everybody wants to get their hands on an LBZ. It's like the holy grail.
It's a great engine,
right? It's kind of eliminated the problems of both generations before. And then they've matched it with a 6-speed Allison, which is a really strong,
a real Allison, not just the one that was marketed as Allison.
That's right. Yeah, it's the real deal, and and it will put up with a lot. It still had some heating issues, and with the transmission temps and stuff, just like the rest of them. But overall, it's very rare that you were doing any head gaskets or anything like that on that truck. Like, somebody would have to really work it hard. Because it had the updated gaskets put in it, so we didn't see a whole lot of failures with that generation, but then you start getting into, the next generation up. I would say, like your 7.5 to 10 was a pretty reliable platform. Still ran the CP3 pump. Everything was still pretty tough. Still had the Allison. Didn't really get a whole lot of stuff happening there, other than now you've got your DPF to deal with. So Now you've gone from having the LBZ, which, only had an EGR on it, to getting into the next generation where now you're dealing with the DPF and emissions and
all that fun stuff.
All the fun stuff plugging up, right? Especially for the people that just kind of drive around town and don't really get out and get the heat to keep that system clean.
That's when they're somebody's out looking for a new truck and they go, "Oh, it's that one."
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Send me back to an LBZ.
Yeah, well, and that kind of happened, right?
Yeah.
And then everybody kind of jumped up from there, getting into all the newer generations. And once you switch over to that 2012, now you're dealing with a CP4 pump failure.
And then that's a industry-wide thing, really. I mean, there's all sorts of, and we've talked about that on the show, and there's a bunch of different theories and fixes, and Bosch has had their recalls, and it's just that's a whole other like 5 podcasts.
Well, yeah, that pump was definitely a major issue, as everybody knows. Other than obviously the design flaws with the pump and why it blows up, I am a firm believer, just from what we see where we are, that the majority of the CP4 pump failures are Duramax, and over the Ford. And our perspective on that is actually, fuel supply, because the Duramaxes until 2017, until they went into the L5Ps, they don't have a factory lift pump.
Oh.
And everybody assumes, that they have a lift pump in the tank. They just assume that it does, because everything pretty much does. Well, the Duramax vans came with a factory lift pump on the frame and a spin-on filter, but the pickups don't. So
interesting. Okay.
So all the fuel supply is being pulled from the pump forward, which is adding strain to that pump. Whether people want to believe it or not. They'll say, "Oh, well, it's engineered that way," and it's okay. But
engineered that way doesn't always, because sometimes you engineer for a price point too.
That's right.
And you may have the best damn pump in the world to meet whatever that price point is that the bean counters gave you. And there's a lot of engineers at OEs who left stuff on the table because they couldn't get it financed through the program budget.
I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. Yeah, when you get to the bean counters, things all of a sudden change, right? Every half a cent makes a difference.
It makes a difference when you're building, hundreds of thousands of these things a year.
Yeah, because, we see a ton of Duramax CP4 failures and we do a ton of CP3 conversions, but the Fords we see very little. We do get them, just like anything, but it's very rare. And I do believe that is because the Ford has a decent quality fuel supply on the frame and a secondary filter. So, whereas the Duramax just has the one spin-on filter, that's it, and then they have no lift pump. So I think that plays a lot into that, helping that poor design pump. Fail catastrophically is just, because it has no fuel supply. And then again, back to you're not running any kind of conditioner.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about it on the show, like our lubricity is a lot worse here than in Europe on our diesel fuel.
Yeah.
If you've got to work the pump harder and there's less lubrication in the fuel for the pump, that's not going to be a good thing.
No, and a lot of people they buy a truck, they don't know a whole lot about it. They just need it for work, and they need the weight capacities, and and they want the reliability of having a diesel truck. But they read the owner's manual, or they talk to their dealer, and the dealer and the owner's manual say that the lubricity and additives are not required.
Right.
It's stated, in all the literature out there that you don't need it. So people are like, "Oh, well, you're selling snake oil. I don't need this stuff." But the reality is that you do need lubrication.
It's like going back to like on a gasoline engine where something can run on 87 octane, a turbo engine, but it's like optimized for premium.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife had a Audi A5 2.0 turbo. She put the cheap gas in, and I like, "What are you doing?" She goes, "Oh, it's cheap." I go, "You're saving $2." I go, "Put premium in, and I guarantee you at the end of this tank, you'll have more range, and it'll be more fun to drive." And she did, and the cost was offset because she got more fuel economy because it was optimized for 91 here in California. And she's like, "You're right, I got more range, and man, this thing's so much more fun to drive." But it's the same thing. It's just like, even though the manufacturer says it doesn't need it, sometimes that's the bare minimum standard. And by layering on something else, you get to a better standard. and obviously they're going to protect their warranties and things like that, but at the same time, I think you have to use a little bit of common sense and knowledge to figure out like what makes sense in this application, whether it's gas, whether it's diesel. Do additives make sense? I mean, you may go to the cheap gas station and it doesn't have any detergents in it, right? And you get coked up valves and things like that, and then somebody goes to AutoZone and pours a bottle of Techron in their tank, and it's like you could be doing that with every gas station visit. Same thing, with an additive for diesel. So I say it as like people are cheap about the wrong thing.
A lot of times, I think they are for sure, yeah, or just uneducated.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not about money; it's about convenience and not knowing as well, right? But it's definitely something that is highly overlooked in the diesel world is running a good conditioner. And like you said, with gas vehicles, people are looking at the price at the pump and they're going, okay, well, it's whatever 10, 15 cents cheaper for 89 octane versus like 92 or 94. And yeah, you're right. If you run the 94. You're going to get better mileage and you're going to get better drivability. It's a better quality fuel.
Yeah.
But that being said, again, I feel like our gas is a lot worse quality than what it used to be.
Oh, for sure.
Like if you go to the gas station and fill a jerry can and dump it out on the ground, like we've had gas that the low octane stuff that won't even barely light. It's like lighting a candle.
Yeah, right.
The stuff's just junk.
Yeah.
So it's nothing like it used to be.
Yeah. So let's go to the Ford 6.7 platform. What are some of the things, as far as I know, and I don't live in your world, but it seems like the 6.7 for the most part has been a really reliable platform for them. Obviously, 6 liters had 7.3 is like the old mechanical horse holy grail. 6 liter is a really decent engine once you fix everything they went cheap on. They sort of did that with the 6.4 and kind of redeem themselves a little bit, but it seems like the 7.3 platform has been like really well designed.
Yeah, well, if we're talking about Ford in general, I would say the 7.3 is a really, really strong engine overall. It did have the weak link of the HUI injection.
Yeah.
Because again, maintenance. It all comes down to maintenance, really. You can't really blame the HUI system because the HUI system actually does function,
and it works great when it's not clogged up with old oil.
Exactly,
right?
And they've run it in medium duty trucks for years. Yeah. A lot of the Internationals and the old Caterpillars, like those things would go forever on HUI injection, and the 7.3s were the same way, but nobody wants to change the oil in them. So then you get stiction issues, and the 6 liter is kind of the same way. It had head gasket issues and
EGR
and EGR coolers rupturing, and and it had issues with stiction on the injectors and Fickham main power boards, and basically you had to take a 6 liter Power Stroke brand new off the lot and had to put $15,000
immediately
to keep it,
because even the stuff brand new wasn't great on those trucks.
No, and there was like 3 or 4 revisions through the years.
And I feel like when the 6.7 came out, I feel like Ford had to atone for the 6.4, 6 liter issues, and they really had to do something special with the 6.7 in order for people to trust Ford with diesels again.
Yeah, it kind of went, kind of downhill because, back to the 7.3, I remember guys, they hated them because they had injection problems. But at the time, it was like $500 for an injector. Times 8 plus having to put them in the truck. So when the 6 liter came out, everybody jumped ship from the 7.3. We were buying mint 7.3s for $2,000, $2,500 because they were worthless. Everybody was getting into the 6 liters, and then
have you gone on Bring a Trailer lately to see what 7.3s go for?
I know, it's crazy.
I'm like $50,000 for a truck with 100,000 miles that's clean, and you're going, what?
Yeah, it's insanity, right? So everybody would jump over. And then the 6 liter started having all their problems. So now everybody wanted the 7.3s, and then the market started to go up.
Yeah.
And then the guys that didn't do that, they all jumped onto the 6.4 when the 6.4 came out in 07.5. And the 6.4 was a whole different animal. Drivability, the truck, it honestly drives absolutely
fantastic.
Fantastic.
I remember the first time that I had a 6.4 truck from the media fleet from Ford that we were testing, and it may have been 4-wheeler at the time. And I remember I had that truck for a good while, and I couldn't believe what a great daily it was. It was comfortable. Throttle tip-in was great. The engine was super flexible. At that time, very quiet. The cab built around it was fun. Like, I was like, this thing is awesome.
Yeah, they really did knock it out of the park on that engine, going to that twin turbo setup for just, daily drivability. Your power to weight on that truck was dialed. Like they had her great. It was sturdy on the road. It towed.
And those were a good
weight.
truck too. I mean, if from a standpoint, as far as looking at, frame strength and durability, like that truck was fairly overbuilt, I think, for what the numbers were on it. Like it's been a good truck that generation. It
was 100%. The issue that it had though is it wasn't very long where they started failing. Because the block design was terrible. They cracked. The piston design was even worse than the block design, and they were constantly cracking pistons. They were constantly blowing head gaskets because they built so much boost. And then you had the common rail fuel system where, the injectors would hang open because of dirty fuel most of the time and lack of maintenance. And now you're driving down the highway, your cylinder temperature is low, and now all of a sudden you get something stuck in one of the injectors, and it's holding wide open, and it just
you're blowing smoke, and it's starting to run.
And then it burns a hole right through the piston, and before you can even get pulled over to the side of the highway, it's done.
You're done.
It's burnt through the piston and right into the block. So the problem with the 6.4 really is that no matter what you do, it's not ever going to be reliable. Like the 6-liter had its flaws, but everybody could.
But I felt like the flaws of the 6-liter were all the accessories and things hanging off the engine, whereas the flaw to the 6.4 was the engine itself.
Exactly. Yeah. So the 6-liter you could bulletproof, as they call it, and drive it into the ground. And really, the only thing
the Neal brothers made a good business off of fixing those things.
Yeah, everybody I think made their money on the 6-liter, and once you fixed it, the only thing you had to worry about now was the fact that everything was sealed by rubber. So you still. If you're running cheap synthetics, the synthetics swell up the rubber and they eat them, and then you blow in, injector O-rings and tube O-rings and all this stuff all the time. So every few years you're doing O-rings in a 6-liter for life. There's nothing you can do about that. But the 6.4, once you cracked a piston or a head gasket, or, the head's cracked all the time, the heads actually came cracked right from Ford, which is quite funny. If you buy a brand new set of heads from Ford and you flip them upside down and look at them, a lot of them actually have hairline cracks in between the valves, right out of the box. So it was just a terribly designed engine. I feel like it was rushed by Navistar when they put that engine together
to fix the 6-liter issues,
or
to say we have something new that we can walk away from the 6-liter rather than just fixing those problems.
Exactly. And then you have to factor in the fact that for the international platform, because they ran the same engine in the international medium duty trucks, but it was derated.
Yeah.
So, it was considerable. I don't know the exact number, but I think it was somewhere around 80 or 100 horsepower less in the commercial application.
Yep.
And then Ford took it and put it in their chassis and bumped up the horsepower.
Yep.
Because it was a race with Cummins.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that the medium-duty trucks, why they're derated, is for durability.
Yeah.
And to your point, at that period of time, you had Cummins going, hey, we're going from 5.9 to 6.7. You have GM introducing a 6.6 Duramax. Well, Ford went backwards. They went from a 7.3 to a 6-liter, and now they've got to be in that 6.5-liter game with everybody else, so they come up with a 6.4.
Yeah.
And so there was, that was like a interesting time for the diesel engine wars, because there wasn't necessarily a clear winner. Lines were being drawn and manufacturers were thrown down. And obviously the horsepower wars on that continue today, but that period of time was interesting because you go to common rail, you get displacement changes, you go to better transmissions, you go to VGT turbos, you go to common rail. Like there was a DPFs. You're going, think of all that technology in like a 5-6 year span or something like that touched everybody. It's a pretty amazing time when all that was going on.
Everybody hit it all at once.
Yeah.
And they all had their individual issues trying to get through it, and then when they went to the 6.7 Power Stroke, the first generation 6.7 it started out really, really well. But there was a certain amount, mainly in the cabin chassis, I would say, over the pickups, but there was a certain amount of the 6.7 Power Strokes that had crank issues kind of right off the bat. So they were breaking cranks pretty early on. And it was kind of held under the rug pretty good for for a while, but we would see quite a few of them come in. But it was almost always on cab and chassis. And, and that could just be because of the severe duty of what they were doing, because there really isn't that many differences between the cab and chassis engine and the pickup. Like the turbos are a little different and they're derated a little bit. But other than that, the base engine platform is pretty much identical. And then guys running in really cold climates, they were spinning bearings on cold starts. So you'd have a lot of guys with spun bearings in a truck with, 50,000 miles. But that was basically like your 11, 12 kind of first gen truck. Once they got into, the 13 and up, they started doing some redesigns and upgrades and that eliminated a lot of that issue. And then now they're just kind of fighting their turbocharger issues, that the Scorpion turbo, I don't know whose idea that was to come out, but it's just, you got a turbo that really isn't balanced properly from the factory. It's got a dual wheel on it. So, it's kind of front heavy and just not really an efficient design. And there was a ton of guys that, those turbos were failing and then they'd put another one on and it would fail in another 20 or 30,000 miles. And, a few years in, you got to the 2015, I think is where they switched over to, got rid of the Scorpion turbo and went into their new redesigned turbo, which had almost no problems at all. And then now the truck came with a factory exhaust brake as well. So now you had something with a good transmission, really good horsepower and good torque, and you had a reliable turbo that wasn't going to blow up and you weren't breaking cranks. So, the 15, 16 generation, I think, is where they really started to dial in and get reliable, where a guy could buy it and literally just change the oil and fuel filters and put fuel in it and
enjoy it
other than emissions issues.
Sure.
Like, we touch on any of these trucks, once we start talking about emissions, they all equally have the same weak points, right? So they're all, DEF failures and O2 sensor failures and the DPFs plugging up because they don't get driven properly.
Well, we talk about that on the podcast, like diesel inappropriateness. And that's like if you are driving your kids to school and it's a 2-mile round trip, your engine's not warm when you get home.
No.
And I've had a friend of mine who had a diesel Grand Cherokee, and she calls me and she's like, hey, this thing's telling me I have to drive 50 miles or something. And I'm like, yeah, because your DPF is clogged, because you do all these short trips. You're not doing a diesel duty cycle, you're doing a gas duty cycle, and the after treatment doesn't have a chance to burn itself off or to do regen or any of that. And so, yeah, you have to go drive 50 miles down and 50 miles back and either do it at freeway speeds or under load or something, because you got to give the car time to, burn all that out of the system. And I tell most people today, if they ask me for advice on a truck, I'm like, what's your use case? How much do you tow? Oh, you don't tow. Okay. How much do you haul? Oh, you don't haul. Okay, then go get the gas engine. Well, my friends in the diesel, and I like, that's great, but here's the thing: is you're gonna spend $12,000 to $15,000 more for that diesel. You now have a more expensive maintenance schedule, more expensive fluids and filters. You now have an additional fluid with DEF, where that $12,000 or $15,000 difference, you have a gas engine that you put gas in all the time. What's the drawback? Well, if you get a 7.3 gas, it's not much, because the towing is almost as good as the diesel, especially up to, let's say, 15,000 pounds or something like that. Anything under that, they're fine. It's got plenty of grunt. And fuel economy. Okay, well, guess how much gas you can buy for those, thousands and thousands of dollars, and your maintenance is easier, and an oil change is cheaper. So I know people love the allure of diesel, and those of us who've been diesel enthusiasts or are diesel enthusiasts, it's really hard not to go. But the way they're designed today, you really do have to have a diesel appropriateness in terms of your use case and duty cycle to make sure that you get a long life. Because you see a lot of the guys that are hot shots and they're pulling trailers around the country and they're doing good, but that's because they're working it and they're doing regular maintenance and there's always a load. But the guy down the street who's driving his crew cab 4x4, 6.7, FX4 around, that guy is going to be at the dealer in the next, 15,000 miles probably.
Well, and that's exactly what happens. It's the case of, buying a diesel truck because their neighbor has one, and it's like, the diesel trucks nowadays, I had this talk the other day actually with my wife, because we kind of laughed, because the teenagers now are really into them. And it's like, in our generation, it was, the Honda Civics and the 5-liter Fox body Mustangs.
Yeah, totally.
like that's what everybody wanted to have, right? And and if you had a really nice notchback
Civic SI, or you had an Integra with a B16 or a B18 in it with a Comtech Icebox or DC4 into 2-into-1 headers, or your buddy had a Fox Body 5-liter Mustang, and it was that was it, or maybe a mini truck. Like that was kind of like that was sort of the scene, right?
Like a little Mazda B2000 or something, and that little S10, and that's where it was at. And now all the kids now are all buying diesel trucks. So they're all buying, the early Common Rail, the second gen Dodges. They're buying the the LBZs and the LB7s. They're getting the early 6 liters. And that's kind of the new kids scene is going after diesels. And then you've got, they can't afford maintenance or anything. So they're just trying to patch them together with whatever they have. And, they're on YouTube figuring out how to fix them. And then you got, like I say, you get the guy that, he literally just drives it to town to go to the grocery store or to pick his kids up from school. And, but his neighbor has a really nice Dodge Ram in the driveway. So he wants a Ram just like his neighbor. And, and that truck just sits there and literally idles around, zero load. It's not getting worked at all. And then he wonders why it's in the shop all the time, because everything's plugged up and, nothing gets a chance to work and clean. And, in my opinion, it should actually be explained to people when they're buying these trucks. But of course, a dealership, they're there to sell you a product, and they're commission based, most of them. So they make money off of what they're selling you. So they're not going to sit you down at a desk and say, oh, by the way,
do you really need a diesel?
They're not going to say, do you really need this truck? And, oh, do you realize that?
Plus the service department likes customers too, right?
They love customers, and it's like, you're not going to sit there and explain to the guy that, if you buy the gas truck, you're $75 to do an oil change and service. And if you buy the diesel truck, you're, $350 to do a full service. So it's like, and that's just your maintenance every 5,000 to 6,000.
Yep.
And then you go off of the book, and, the book's telling you, that you're supposed to go 10, 12,000 miles on oil changes with emissions. It's like, people have no idea how detrimental that is to the engine. Like you're literally taking all of that soot load out of the EGR. You're forcing it through into your intake system as you're driving down the road. So basically your truck is breathing full-time exhaust and soot.
Yeah.
And it literally makes the oil gritty.
Yeah. You can feel it, in your fingers.
Yeah. It's essentially like anybody that has any experience, like I always tell people it's like valve grind compound. If anybody's ever worked with it, it's like a really fine sandy for lapping valves in the old days when guys used to do it. It's kind of like that's what your oil does. It's all that soot goes into your oil.
And that's why a really good synthetic oil makes a difference, and also good filtration. But even good filtration isn't going to get down
not if you
some
go
of
too
that
far.
stuff. And even like for me, I use AMSOIL in my stuff, but I still do 5,000 mile oil changes, even though I get oil that can go 20,000 miles. No way. I'll spend the money and I'll change it every 5 because I know that I'm never going to have a problem.
Then you don't have issues, but the majority of people don't do that because there's a lot of oil going into it for starters, and AMSOIL is a good quality oil and it's not cheap. So when it says 20,000 kilometers or 20,000 miles on the bottle, people are going to go further than that almost, because they were like, well, we got this really good oil and it's going to last for a long time. And, so we'll go 20,000. And I think that's where a lot of people had problems with, the newer Dodge 5th gens, right? Which we didn't even get to those yet, because all of the new Dodge 5th gens have early camshaft failures because the lifters fail. We started seeing the 5th gen failures 3 years ago. They were coming in like literally 10, 15,000 miles. These trucks were showing up ticking cold until they warmed up. And that, the first couple we saw were running on 3 cylinders cold.
Oh, wow.
They were just chugging and bucking, and the fenders were jumping half an inch up and down. They were just running like complete trash. Yeah. Until they warmed up. And I was like, well, this is like a stiction issue is how it's acting.
Yeah, the viscosity is keeping those parts from moving in the ways they need to.
Yeah, and basically the lifters don't pump up. They get all gummed up and sticky from lack of oil changes. And then when the lifter starts to fail, it slaps on the cam lobe and it takes the camshaft out.
Oh, okay.
And it's a big thing. Like there's as many 5th gen camshaft failures out there as probably grid heater failures.
I believe. I mean, if you're looking at it and you go, oil change for my diesel trucks, $350, $400, and there's a severe duty schedule and there's a normal schedule. Well, I'll just go with the normal schedule, right? Because it's expensive, and they don't abide by the severe duty. But let's be honest, unless you're doing all highway unloaded, you're severe. Mm-hmm. If you're ever towing, if you're ever hauling, if you're ever off road, and if you're ever in the city stop and go, you're automatically severe duty right there. A lot of people think, I don't really do. I'm just driving around town. That's severe duty, and they think, no, I'm normal duty because I'm doing normal things. I'm not hauling and towing. That's not it. It's the stop and go. It's the speed differential. It's the acceleration, the engine braking. Like, all that matters.
Oh, for sure. You get a lot of carbon buildup that way by not having anything under load. So oil changes and maintenance is a big thing that gets overlooked by, I think, the majority of especially diesel truck owners. But I'm sure it's the same in the gas world, right? I'm sure it's no different, but in my world, we only work on diesel pickups, so I can't really say.
Yeah, that's your point of reference.
That's my point of reference. I can't really say what the gas world is doing, but if they don't change the oil in their Cummins, they're not going to change it in their Honda.
It's
the same mentality, right? But these trucks have to have clean oil, and they have to have clean fuel filters, and they have to have clean air filters. You wouldn't believe how many trucks we have come in that have been driving around for months with a
dead mouse in the airbox.
Well, not even a mouse. The filters are just literally sucked into the tube of the airbox, and they're just sucking in straight
everything.
Dirt. Yeah. And the guy's like, I just changed it just a year ago, and it's like, dude, you're driving in the fires and the smoke, and you're you're driving in dusty climates. It's like you need to change your air filter 2-3 times a year. Just to keep air movement and. Maintenance is a huge thing that gets overlooked on anything, any vehicle, and I think it's because people don't want to spend money if they don't have to. Partly, but it ends up costing them more money in the long run by not doing it.
I totally agree.
It's a hard one to push, though.
Yeah, right. Well, especially if you're the shop owner, right?
Well,
you're just trying to make money off me. No, I'm trying to. Believe it or not, I'm trying to see you less, right? But everybody thinks automatically that you're going to try and push them, upsell them,
And it's funny because our shop, we're a pretty small outfit. I've been around for a long time, and we've been working on trucks for a long time. I'm really well known for what I do, and I run a really straightforward approach with customers to where even if they don't like what I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah.
And I would rather tell them straight and lose their business than try and take them for a ride and offer them things they don't need. So like our shop does not upsell, and we're small. We're only a 3-bay shop. And I leave it that way because that way we can stay on top. Well, it's more personal, and we can stay on top of quality control.
Yeah.
So when you start getting, a lot of my friends have 10, 12, 15-bay shops.
Yeah, how do you know every one of those tax is up to your standard?
You don't, and that you're constantly hiring, and then the people that,
because you're trying to fill. If you're going to have the lift, you don't want it empty, so you need to fill somebody to be making money off that lift, right?
Exactly. But now you can't pay attention to what he's doing, and now you have quality control issues, and you have comebacks, and then you have pissed off customers. So we have built our reputation off of, we are not the cheap shop in town. We're actually probably the most expensive. We're in line with dealership pricing. Because we run all the dealership tools, we run all the dealership scan equipment. We have we do our own keys in house. We do everything we do, the dealer can do, and I make sure that we buy all of that equipment so that we are ahead of the curve. But we're 40 to 60 trucks deep, 12 months out of the year, 3-bay shop.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to sit there and tell a guy that he needs stuff he doesn't need. Because we don't have time to even do the upsell work, let alone,
you're trying to get him out off the racks to get the next guy in.
We just want him reliable. So like if he comes into the shop, we're going to fix him with the best parts possible and get him going.
Well, and that trust means he's, I guarantee you, because I've worked in shops before with these customers. Once you build that rapport, they will drop it in the night box, the keys in the night box, leave the truck out front, they go, just do whatever it needs.
Yeah, exactly.
And they let you do it. You do it. They're happy.
And they send all their friends.
Yeah. That's the best marketing, right? Is that guerrilla marketing from a happy customer?
I think so. It's there's not a lot of handshake deal companies out there anymore, though. It's and it's a hard racket because honestly, you don't make as much profit margins as people think. Like people, they're looking at a $10,000, $12,000 bill, and they basically think you just put your kid through college for that
you wish.
year.
No.
But really, like, parts are through the roof. You're really, how do you put 40% markup on an $800 injector? You just
can't do it.
You can't do it. You can't put that onto the customer. So your staff need a living wage. So costs are through the roof.
Yep.
So I think a lot of shops upsell to survive.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, and I think part of it too is people often complain about labor rates, but the reality is, like, I remember there's that kind of story where the guy goes into a dealership or a shop and says, I need this thing done. It's like an hour of labor is $150 an hour or whatever. Yeah, okay. And the guy comes out and does it in 5 minutes. Well, you only took 5 minutes to do it. He goes, well, you didn't pay me to do it. You paid for my knowledge of how to do it quickly, right? And that's why a shop with a high labor rate and a quality staff matters, is because they have the wisdom and the knowledge to get the thing done right.
And the equipment.
And if you agree up front to what the shop hourly rate is, most of them are minimum an hour, and most jobs have a book rate that you might go to. If you happen to be more efficient to getting the job done, well, you get paid a little bit more, and that's okay because you're a business. It's not a charity case. No, it's no different than the people you're dealing with. It's for whatever reason, if somebody's doing a kitchen renovation on their house, and they're spending a couple $100,000 doing a kitchen reno. They're okay with that, and they're happy every time they walk into their house and they look at their new kitchen and they're like, yeah, it was $200,000, but I got a wolf.
We love it. We love it. Right?
I got red knobs on my 48-inch stove.
Exactly. But then you tell them they got to spend $10,000 on their mode of transportation that gets them to work and makes them their money. And it's like you're pulling teeth, like it's the end of the world. And it's like, for whatever reason, people do not like putting money into a depreciating asset. Even though that depreciating asset
is what makes their money for the other assets that are investment level, right?
Yeah. And then furthermore, if you were to flip the coin and they were in your shoes, like, they go to work for a paycheck every day and they want to make good benefits and they want to make, a good annual salary, but they don't want you to make money off of them.
Right.
So it's a pretty big mixed up conception over what the reality of it is, because people all need to eat and they all need to have a house and everybody needs to get paid and everything costs money. So everybody's in the same boat, but the automotive industry, I feel like, is a very judged industry.
100%. I got word that you just ordered yourself a 26 F350 high output.
I did, yeah.
So let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so I actually just ordered it last month, a 2026 F350 dually high output, full load platinum. Okay. And it took a long time to do it because they're a lot of money. They're not cheap. So, but we decided that my old truck's a 2017 and it's got about 350,000 miles on it. So we've run her pretty good, and it's actually never cost us anything, to be honest. The thing has been really, really, really reliable, but we're starting to do more traveling, just going to events and we're getting our e-commerce website going and doing all that kind of stuff. So we're going and meeting and greeting people. And, so I figure, well, if we're going to tow around a trailer, we're going to go to these events, we're going to want something decent to do it in. So we went and ordered this truck. And
what color is it?
It's their new Argon Blue.
Oh, that's a pretty color.
Yeah. So we're going to do ghost decals on it, lay decals, and then we're going to bolt pretty much every Banks part you can buy on it for bolt-on stuff. And we'll do a lift and tires, and we'll do a little mini series video as we go, just kind of showing the whole build process.
Right on. All right. Before I let you go, I have to know what's up with the helicopter.
So
because there's a story with the helicopter.
We have a 1974 Bell 206 Jet Ranger. A lot of people are like, well, why does the diesel shop have a helicopter? And, some guys are like, oh, well, everybody in the diesel industry nowadays seems to have a helicopter. Because it seems like every YouTuber and guy out there seems to own one.
Well,
but
some of those guys went to jail recently.
But in our case, a really good friend of mine owns...
Well, let me just say this. Okay, so if you're thinking a Bell 206, you may think of like, oh, I don't know, Vietnam-era helicopter from Rambo, First Blood. And then you go, well, it's that exact helicopter.
It is, yeah. So,
hold on.
Yeah, so it is. So we bought this from a helicopter company, and they were actually parting it out. So it was in their hangar. in pieces, hadn't been flown in 5 or 6 years. And they're a really good client of ours, and we do a ton of work for them on their diesel pickups. And I wanted to get my pilot's license. And I started out actually with a Rotoway Exec experimental helicopter. They're little 2-seater fiberglass. They were made in Arizona. But in Canada, you can't train in them. In the U.S., you can.
Okay.
So here you can get an instructor and you can get a rating in an experimental aircraft. Well, in Canada, you can't because they won't sell you insurance.
Oh, got you.
And the certified world helicopters are very expensive.
Yeah.
So I couldn't afford to get in that way. So I went like 10 or 12 years not doing it. And then I talked to these clients of mine and they're like, oh, yeah, well, we have this old helicopter that we're thinking about selling. We kind of acquired it and started parting it out. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I went and took a look at it and, we agreed on a price and everything. And they're like, oh, by the way, it's the original helicopter from Rambo First Blood.
It's so cool.
And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, it's the same year, the same kind?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, it is the helicopter that was in the movie. It's and sure enough, you Google it. So if you go on Google and you put in C- Golf Tango Papa Hotel, which is the call sign, for the Canadian registration, you scroll down on Google about three paragraphs down and boom, there it is. Scott Hardy, a whole list of Rambo First Blood. And it shows you all of the scenes it was in. It shows you pictures of the helicopter at the time.
That's
it shows
so
the
cool.
sheriff hanging out, shooting at Rambo on the cliffs. So it was in that whole scene where the sheriff was shooting at him when he's falling off and jumps off of the cliff.
Yeah.
So that is the helicopter from the movie. So we, it took me 7 years to get a hold of it and about 2 years to get it flying. And it's flying now.
That's so rad.
So that's kind of the story with the helicopter. So
Dude.
now we're going to use it for hopefully events and things like that.
You gonna shoot people from it or anything?
No, that's not the plan. But we would like to get to a point where maybe we can bring it down to the States and try and get it signed by Sylvester Stallone.
That would be awesome. Well, he listens to this podcast, don't you?
No, I had no idea.
Either did I. But if he does, truckshowpodcast@gmail.com, or if you're out there and you have a way to get a hold of Mr. Stallone, hit me up. And I'll make sure Brad gets the contact info because we have a lot of people listen, and you never know. There's some weird connection where it's like, oh, that's my uncle. I'll have him sign it, right? Who knows?
It's a pretty cool piece of movie history.
Yeah.
And honestly, I can't believe that the aviation industry would part it out in the first place. You'd think that they would have sold it to a collector or
something.
Well,
they did.
Well, they did me, yeah. So I saw the dream and I resurrected it, and we will, do our best to keep it going for as long as possible.
Awesome.
We actually plan on bringing it to the 45th Rambo anniversary in Hope. So it was filmed in Hope, BC.
Okay.
So I do plan on bringing it to there. And then we'll just kind of see where it goes.
Cool, man. Well, a little applause there for Brad Hunt, owner of Protech. And, dude, thanks for coming over. I know you kind of drove down from, that guy in the back, he's going to hoot and holler here in a second. Man, they love you.
They do.
They must love Protech Diesel Centers. All right, so if you want to follow Brad and the company, so it's just Protech Diesel Center. That's on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok. You have your YouTube channel as well.
Yep.
There's so much to talk about. I mean, I still want to hit kind of the diesel scene in Canada at some point. Maybe get into kind of the deletes and the emission stuff going on up there, and getting to maybe like tuning, good versus bad. I mean, we didn't even touch on that stuff. So you're going to have to come back on, but fortunately, we can do this over the phone too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll have to do this again. I've got lots of insight into all of those topics, so we deal with it every day.
Well, you are now our resident Canadian diesel expert, so we'll tap you from time to time and get you back. But really appreciate you coming down and hanging out in the pod shed. By the way, what do you think of the pod shed?
I think it's pretty good.
It's cool, right?
Yeah, it's a wicked setup. I like it.
Yeah, I always tell the story because Lightning, Jay, he's like, we can't just have a studio in your backyard. Then you'll have people walking in your backyard. I'm like, then how surprised are they going to be when they realize it's cool?
Right? It's a pretty cool setup in here.
Appreciate that.
Well, the only thing you're missing is a beer cooler in the corner. But other than that,
I mean, I got the Dr. Pepper fridge over there, and there is cold beer in there. But we can always do better.
See that? But it's looking pretty good. It's well built.
Thank you. Yeah. So this is where the magic happens, and we're glad to share it with our friends. So thanks for coming on. And again, Brad Hunt, owner of Protech Diesel Centers, and up in Kamloops, BC. And if you guys have any questions for Brad, you could reach out to me, again, truckshowpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll look forward to having you on again soon.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime, man. It was a blast. It was good to be here.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks again, Brad Hunt, for coming to the Pod Shed all the way down from Kamloops, BC, in the Protech Diesel Centers. It's been a while since we got into diesel stuff, so I'm glad we had him on the show. But the other thing it's been a while since we got into was, well, emails.
You email? Yeah. I email? Do it. We email? That's right. Everybody email. Type it up. You email? Proofread. I email? Send it. We email? Click it. Everybody email.
Come on, who doesn't love this? Love this jingle. It's been far too long, so I've got a few emails here. The first one from Rob Kaiser says questions about the dealer relationship discussion on the podcast. Hey, Sean. Rob Kaiser here. I was listening to your recent podcast with Lightning and had a question about dealer relationships, especially as they relate to maintenance and potential warranty leeway down the road. I've had my Wrangler just over a year and absolutely love it. It has about 10,500 miles on it. I took it to the dealer I purchased it from for one of the initial 7,500 Jeep Wave oil change and tire rotation services after they had been encouraging me for months to come in. The experience raised some concerns. I wasn't given any kind of vehicle inspection report when I picked it up. I've done some off-roading and expected at least a basic once-over. I'm running larger AEV wheels and tires. After the rotation, the balance weights were rubbing on the calipers. I noticed this immediately, turned around, and they reversed the rotation, but told me to take the vehicle back to the shop that installed and balance the tires rather than addressing it themselves. The dealer inflated the tires to 40 PSI, the max, despite my shop recommending closer to 32 given the vehicle's lighter weight. A week later, I received a notice saying I declined a recommended service air filter, which was never discussed with me. Now they're hounding me again to come in, even though I'm not due for service until around 15,000 miles. I expected to build a solid long-term relationship with the dealer, but this doesn't feel right. My questions are, should I consider switching dealers? Is this an issue with this dealer or fairly typical of Jeep dealers in general? Would it make sense to rely more on an independent shop for routine maintenance, especially given that the dealer already redirected me there? I'm in North Orange County, would prefer not to travel too far if I can avoid it. Appreciate any perspective you can share. So essentially, that's a bit of a loaded question, but I would give the dealer one more opportunity and raise your concerns. Sometimes there's a new person working, for example, that if you've got a kid blowing up tires and is doing it wrong, they deserve the chance to make it right and correct that employee that's reading the label on the side of the tire and not the door jamb, for example. The dealer he mentions, I haven't heard great things about, but sometimes a dealer can be a crapshoot. I take mine to a different dealer, but I also have a good service advisor. Having a relationship with your service advisor means a ton. And sometimes you have to drive for a good dealer experience, especially if it's only, once a year. You might want to drive out of your area for a dealer that is pro aftermarket, for example, and warranty friendly. Most Jeep dealers above and beyond are way friendly to lifted and warranty Jeeps because they sell them, and B, that's their customer base. So my experience has been with all Jeep dealers versus the other dealers out there are super friendly to aftermarket. So can't believe they didn't give you an inspection report. You should always get that. That should be standard, especially when you're doing a service. Questions about the weights rubbing on the caliper, because the fitment should be the same no matter how the tires fit on there. So I'd be curious if maybe they rotated your spare that had the weights in a different spot, for example. And I would say there's a computer system that is probably set for every 3,000 miles. That's basically guessing your mileage and sending you all sorts of service stuff. You can ignore that stuff. Not a big issue. And the air filter, if you're not due, you're not due. But that's a call to the service manager saying, hey, it says I declined this. I was never given an option. Again, that's something to follow up with the employees to make sure that their processes are right. I know you're not doing, or you shouldn't be doing their job for them, but at the same time as a customer, I think you owe the business a chance to correct it and make you a happy customer. And if they don't, then switching your service dealer is a priority. You can also make a ticket with Jeep Cares, which is a group through Jeep that will follow up on any of those types of concerns. My opinion is always going to be the same regardless of brand, and that's get your services done by the dealer throughout the warranty period. Because if something comes up, they're going to look and see that you have a history with them. They're going to go, oh, we'll take care of this customer, especially if it's on the cusp or just outside of warranty. They'll goodwill it for you. Otherwise, they'll say, no, this person has never been here. Who cares? Those are sort of my thoughts, and dealers are always sending out hey, if we didn't earn our 5 stars for the survey, let us know, because those 5-star surveys hit them hard. And if you gave them a 3, that's a big deal. So you can always have some recourse there as well. Got the next one here from Brent Racine. Says, lightning.
Lightning, 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 lightning.
He says, I just listened to your episode with Lightning. I do miss you guys being together.
You're a lying sack of shit.
Nobody likes us. We were terrible. Every time we did a show.
This is the worst show we've ever done.
And I don't know how it was always the worst, but it was.
You can hear it sucking.
Every single time.
That was awful. I mean, that was awful.
But I do miss having Lightning on the show, and having him back in studio was a lot of fun. He says, you guys are like a morning show. You guys play off each other so good. You should try to bring back Lightning a little more often. And 5 stars.
Congratulations, you have earned 5 stars.
Well, that's not up to me. That's up to Lightning. He's a very busy boy. So just in case anybody was wondering, Lightning's not on the show because we went to fisticuffs one day and we split apart. Lightning's not on the show because Lightning had other priorities and other things that were taking or in need of his time. And the podcast was one of those things that was sucking up a lot of his time. So he had to kind of make a decision. So that's why he's not on the show. He's welcome back anytime. And if there's an issue, I wouldn't have him back. But that's not the case. I miss him. All right. This one is from Dennis Durrell. Dr. Pepper, now number 2. He says, this is from AI, so take it for what it is. But I figured you'd like that Dr. Pepper is now the number 2 in the nation. And what's up with Fanta? So continuing with the letter, it says, number 1, the Pepsi belt is shrinking. Pepsi's dominance is increasingly localized to the Northeast, New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. If your map shows Pepsi winning the South or West, it's very likely outdated. I don't like Pepsi. I'll be honest with you. I just don't like it. I don't know why. Number 2, the Dr. Pepper surge. Dr. Pepper is now known as the official number 2 soda in the United States by volume.
I got a winner!
Well, at least second place. So they're the second winner. Says, any map that doesn't show Dr. Pepper winning states like Oklahoma, Kansas is missing current market realities. Of course. Number 3, the Coke generic in Georgia and much of the South. Coke isn't just a brand. It's the word for all soda. While Coke wins the sales battle there, survey data can be skewed because residents might say they want a Coke, but then order a Dr. Pepper.
What's wrong with you?
Just say you want a Dr. Pepper so this data can get organized the right way. Anyway, and number 4, flavor diversity. You'll notice brands like Fanta in California and Oregon and Canada Dry in Massachusetts and Vermont appearing as quote-unquote favorites in recent Google Trends data, reflecting a shift away from traditional colas toward fruit and ginger flavors. All right, what say you guys? I have seen a major push in Dr. Pepper availability and people wanting it for, maybe the last 3 to 5 years. I remember Taco Bell, which was exclusively a Pepsi place. They used to have Dr. Pepper. They took it away for a while, and within months, maybe 6 months, I stopped going. I'm like, well, I'm not having your crappy Taco Bell if I can't wash it down with some delicious Dr. Pepper. And on a whim, I had gone back there not too long after that. And they're like, oh, yeah, we're back. Dr. Pepper's back. We had a lot of people asking for it. All right, and one last email here from our friend RB. And he says, hello, Sean. I love the podcast with Borla. Very interesting and informative. And David Borla is such a forthright, down-to-earth person. It was a great podcast. Thank you, Ray. I was surprised there was no discussion on the Fratzonic exhaust sounds from the Charger EV. Some of the sounds David demonstrated to you in the F-150 Lightning sounded, to my ear, slightly reminiscent of the Charger's Fratzonic chamber shrieking sounds, reminding me of an electronic rendition of a cougar screaming. The animal, not the car or that type of woman. Not that I know anything about the last one. Sure, Ray. So, I didn't even think about the Fratzonic exhaust just because I haven't seen one in person, and the way it's described is like it has a sound chamber, like a muffler that is taking noise, but I've heard some of it's electronic. I just don't know enough about it, and I probably should have asked David about it. I may send him an email, and if he writes back or if I get some info on that, I'll read it on the show. Ray also says, I love the Flated podcast. Just got around to listening to that one. I did go to their website and bought a couple of pieces of the furniture and the hand pump using the Truck Show Podcast 15% discount. Thanks for that, of course. I don't do any camping anymore, but I figured when the ex-wife comes to get more of the furniture, the Flated furniture will come in handy and be perfect for my needs. Simple, rugged, practical, easily cleaned, and easily moved. It's all those things. By the way, the Flated furniture is rad. We've had it camping. We've had it at trade shows in our booth at OVR. It's fantastic. He also says, when you had Jay back a few podcasts ago, you also commented that no one sends you emails anymore. For the record, I've sent a few now and then all along, but in particular, back in November 9th, I emailed the promised follow-up report of my friend Dave's new RHO, replacing his old Rebel. Yes, Ray, I did see that, and you are always sending good emails. I didn't have other emails to read. I don't like to read one at a time. I usually like to do 3 to 4. And until I have 3 to 4, it doesn't make sense to read one email on the air. And so that's kind of what I've been waiting for. And then I forgot about it. So I'll read that on the next show because it'll be a good follow-up for people who are curious. It says, anyway, keep up the great work. We TSP listeners are grateful for everything you do. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for staying with me and listening to the show. And I'm still working hard to get caught up on episodes, but we'll get there. It's a lot of work, but it's definitely worth it. I still enjoy it. And I enjoy all of you immensely. All right, send me your thoughts by emailing the show. Just like I said, truckshowpodcast@gmail.com, or follow us on social @truckshowpodcast or @Sean P. Holman.
The Truck Show, the Truck Show, the Truck Show, oh, oh.
And now that you guys have listened to my pleas for emails, please keep sending those. But also, we need some at the 5-star hotline. It's been so neglected that Google sent me a thing saying, like, if I didn't send some text messages and start making calls with that within 30 days, they're going to yank it from me. And that'd suck if we had 8 years of the Truck Show podcast. By the way, next month is 8 years, I think. But anyway, if we had 8 years of Truck Show podcast, 657-205-6105, suddenly vaporized, it'd be horrible. So I think I only have one voicemail right now. So please, take a few minutes, send a voicemail. I want to hear you guys. I want to hear your voices. I want to put you on the air. Again, 5-star hotline, 657-205-6105. Of course, you can join the Facebook group, the Podshed Insiders, which I think is a great idea, except for I think it robs some of you guys from sending in emails because you can hop on that group, and then everybody gives you feedback. I give you feedback. We all talk about it, and then I don't have anything for the show. So I may have to steal some stuff from there. All right, got to thank our sponsors, AMSOIL.com. If you want the best in synthetics, oil change kits, car care products, merch, greases, lubes. For those of you who love your vehicles and want the best synthetics, if you love your vehicles like we do, again, AMSOIL, they have been an amazing partner and sponsor of the Truck Show podcast, and we love them dearly. Also, you can find some awesome knives at a great price by going to kershaw.kaiusa.com and get yourself a Kershaw knife today. And lastly, the best in high-quality adventure, gear, lifestyle, and vehicle reviews are only found in the pages of OVR Magazine. Get free access to our digital library for a year or a discount on print by heading to OVRmag.com and using the code @TruckShowPodcast. As always, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to doing it again soon.
The Truck Show Podcast is a production of Truck Famous LLC. This podcast was created by Sean Holman and Jay Tillis, hosted by Sean Holman, and uses production elements by DJ Omar Khan and Jay Tillis. If you like what you've heard, please open your Apple Podcast or Spotify app and leave us a 5-star review. And if you're a fan, there's no better way to support the show than by sharing it and patronizing our sponsors. Some vehicles may have been harmed during the making of this podcast.